Yesterday, the true political leaders in this country, Bernie Sanders and others, including Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, had a climate change town hall in DC and talked about the severity of the threat that we're facing and what we need to do to meet it. And that same night, Donald Trump and his administration decided to move in exactly the opposite direction. This is what economic advisor Larry Kudlow announcing that they would be cutting, they plan to, all subsidies for electric vehicles and renewable sources of energy. That same night that there's this enthusiastic coming together of climate activists and all that, they're looking to cut those subsidies. Larry Kudlow specifically said, as a matter of our policy, we want to end all of those subsidies. And by the way, other subsidies that were imposed during the Obama administration, we are ending, whether it's for renewables and so forth. Bear in mind, we could have known that this was going to come since Donald Trump tweeted just a few days ago this, very disappointed with General Motors and their CEO, Mary Barra, for closing plants in Ohio, Michigan, and Maryland. Nothing being closed in Mexico and China. The US saved General Motors, and this is the thanks we get. We're now looking at cutting all GM subsidies, including for electric cars, and then he goes on. So once again, I know that we like to write off Donald Trump's Twitter, but sometimes he tweets something crazy and then that becomes the crazy official policy of our government. So I don't know if Larry Kudlow agrees with this policy for the same reason that Donald Trump does. I don't know if it's purely about they're mad at GM, so they decide that they're going to hurt American car manufacturers. But cutting those subsidies is significant. It means that fewer people will buy those cars won't sell as well. Companies will invest less money in research and development to produce more efficient cars, building on the technology over time, and we will be less well prepared to deal with at least that component of the emissions that are contributing to climate change in this country. But very casual change for them.
Yeah, so a couple things about this. Number one, interestingly enough, they have decided not to end the subsidies on oil, or natural gas, or coal. So the fossil fuel subsidies will continue, and there are literally so many fossil fuel subsidies that even experts have a hard time tracking all of them. And so the range of how much subsidies the fossil fuel companies get range from $4 billion a year to $24 billion a year. So the most reliable number, to the best of my knowledge, was 14 billion, but I'd take, all incoming facts on that issue. But it is an enormous amount of subsidies for an industry that does not need it at all. They've had subsidies for over 100 years. Subsidies are supposed to be for a young industry to make sure they can get up off their feet. Do we think oil's gotten up off its feet? Has it stabilized yet? And so, and of course, that's just corruption. They're the most profitable companies in the world. They're literally the companies that need subsidies the least on the entire planet, let alone the fact that they're destroying the planet. Even if they didn't have terrible consequences and harm that they were causing, they still wouldn't need the subsidies. It would still be a crime to take our money as taxpayers, to take money that you give in taxes and to give it to ExxonMobil. But they're not ending those. They're ending it for renewable energies that actually create jobs, save the planet, and actually those are companies that do need it because it is a nascent industry. And the subsidies that they gave earlier led to a lot of those companies stabilizing, getting their feet under them, and now competing with fossil fuel. Yeah. So fossil fuel sends in their lobbyists using this GM thing probably as an excuse to go and destroy renewable energy. That is called crony capitalism. Yep. It is the definition of it. It is not the free market. And so understand what Donald Trump is doing. As usual, he's messing around with the free market. If he actually cared about it and he wanted to be principled, I don't agree with ending the renewable energy subsidies. But at a bare minimum, you all have to agree, even if you're conservative, maybe particularly if you're conservative, that he should have ended all the subsidies, including for oil, gas, and coal, but he didn't.
Yeah. And look, this is, I guess, the 70th story like this that we've done in the past 2 years, where when you put climate deniers and people who despise the environment and love oil and coal, when you put them in office, this is what you get. And so every week or so, every 2 weeks at max, we have a story like this where we are screwed over when it comes to our environment and our climate, that we don't have time to be screwing around. We don't have a bunch of years that we can just afford for them to be driving us off a cliff as fast as they possibly can. But this is what we get. We get this, we get getting rid of Obama-era CAF standards, we get the destruction of the methane regulations, new oil drilling in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, more oil drilling offshore. I mean, I could honestly go on for this entire hour, and we actually did a couple of videos where it was just a listing of the many regulation changes that benefit coal and oil and natural gas and fracking and harm our ability to deal with the threat of climate change. But this is what we get. And there are other proposals. I'm not gonna go through them. It's just, it's distressing to see in a 24-hour period, we have people who are serious, whether they're activists or politicians, and we saw both in DC at Bernie Sanders' climate meeting, who take this threat seriously, who wanna institute something like a Green New Deal, who wanna deal with climate change while generating millions of jobs and renewed economic activity and all of that. And then to know that best case scenario, we get to wait about 2 years, unless we are more successful than we could possibly imagine in convincing the Republicans to go over to our side, we still have to wait a couple of years because of this ridiculous, unnecessary, suicidal detour we've taken as a country.
All right, last couple of things. One, it might be a lot of huffing and puffing as usual with Donald Trump. He cannot by himself do this regulation according to experts. Now, how many times has he broken the law? So I don't know that he cares about that. But the Democrats are coming to the House and they will not allow this to go forward.
Because it's a component of the tax law, that is the idea.
That's right.
But we'll see.
By the way, we say the Democrats will not allow this, but they are Democrats.
Yeah, I find it to be unlikely. I find it more likely that he would just do an executive order and say, I don't care what you say, I'm gonna do it.
Yeah, and I don't care what the law is, et cetera, and which he's done on many occasions. But now I'm gonna give him a tiny bit of ironic credit. The idea that corporations are people and patriotic and we should just beseech them is preposterous. I've said it thousands of times. So here, Trump is not beseeching them, he's trying to punish them. Now you can't punish one particular company, you can't single it out, and they realize that. And Larry Kudlow, his chief economic advisor, seems frustrated by that piece of law again. So you can't do that, but he is trying to put consequences on companies for cutting back on jobs and leaving the country. Okay, but just can you please do it in a smart way and a non-corrupt way, right? So there's 1,000 different ways that you could have gone after GM and other companies that are doing this. But why did you choose to just kill the renewable energy part and target their electric vehicles in specific? It seems like, no, that's the corruption part. The oil companies asked you to do that, and then you use the GM closing down their plants as an excuse to do the bidding of the people who gave you campaign donations.
Yeah.
So it's like a kernel of like, hey, if you're gonna be a tough guy, I'm actually gonna back you up on that. I know not a lot of other progressives believe in that kind of stuff, but I do. I'd push them around. That'll be fun. Can you imagine from a progressive perspective? That would be amazing, right? But at the end of the day, Donald Trump always comes to the same conclusions: incompetence and corruption.
Yeah.
And he did it again.
Yeah, and you also have to bear in mind that we might not have had some of this closing down of these plants if he hadn't put in the tariffs that have cost them something like $1 billion on steel and aluminum, and supported a tax bill that incentivized corporations sending jobs overseas. So if you're gonna do both of those things and then act shocked and chagrined when some of these plants close down, that's a little bit disingenuous.
Totally agreed. John Iadarola is correct. tyt.com/John. Oh, look at that.
Let's go to break fast.
A rare magnanimous act by me to join up. Okay. He might just catch me. Doubt it.
I doubt it too.
Okay. On the go? Don't worry, we got you covered. You can still listen to TYT at our new podcast network. Find us on Apple Podcasts, the Google Play Store, or at tyt.com/podcast.